All right. Well, last week's question, we couldn't get you to shut up. So some land, some may not. That's all right. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Kurt, and I'm one of the pastors here. And again, to all the dads in the room, happy Father's Day. To those of you watching online, happy Father's Day. I am thrilled to be a part of a community that just has so many incredible father figures, both biological, adoptive, uncles, funkles, all the ways that we get to see the work of God in people's lives. And so if you're here today, we honor you. And there's a lot of fun stuff out in the lobby for you afterwards. It's going to be cheesy like a dad joke, so be ready. So not your average dad and root beer and all the fun stuff. But today, as we continue our series, Taking Back Monday, we're looking throughout this month at this question of what if being a part of a spiritual community on Sundays actually made our experience on Monday, wherever we might find ourselves working, better or different or even more impactful, more in line with the way of Jesus. What does it look like to actually partner with God in the work that we're doing, empowered by His Spirit to actually make a difference in the world? And so whether you find yourself in a job that you love, whether you find yourself in a job that you don't love so much, whether you find yourself in a season of retirement, whether you are on summer break and your parents said it's time to get a job, wherever you might find yourself, now our hope is that in this conversation we actually get to explore how God is at work in the spaces that sometimes we might assume He's absent from when we go to work on Monday. And so we've navigated through a couple different questions of what does it look like to actually see work as valuable, not as just a suffering or a bummer or a necessary evil, but actually it's a gift that God gave to us in the human experience even before sin entered the equation. We looked last week at who we become is actually far more important than anything that we actually do, and that we can have a posture of the model and the way of Jesus in our workplace. That even if we're not in the service industry, we are all invited to take a posture of serving as we follow Jesus. And today, we're actually exploring the question of how do we make money matter? That for many of us, work is a place that we go to get a paycheck. It's the place that we put up with the boss, and we do the task, and we do the things for the purpose, if we're really honest, it boils down to all the things we put up with is because we know the end of the month, or every 2 weeks, however it's going to work, like we're going to get money in our bank account, and that makes the suffering worth it, right? And so the question is, though, how do we actually make the money that we make a difference? How do we make money matter? And this may surprise you that Jesus actually said more about money than almost anything else in his recordings of his teaching by his followers. That was the topic he seemed to cycle around more and more and more than anything else. And it wasn't because he believed that money got you into heaven. It wasn't because he necessarily needed your money. It wasn't because money actually does anything necessarily for our relationship with God. But Jesus knew something about us that we often try to forget or minimize or distract ourselves from, and that is that money is perhaps one of the greatest areas that we can see the truth about ourselves, that our relationship with money tells more about us than almost anything else in our life. That Jesus was not after money, that's not why he talked about it, but he was after our hearts and our identity being rooted in what God has to say, and he knew that money is often, for me, and my guess for you, is what gets in the way. That money is what gets in the way of us experiencing what God actually has for us. And so, as we start off, just to kind of level set our understanding, like my guess is that in most rooms, including this one, if you're watching online, you and I, at different seasons of our life, maybe constantly, we find ourselves in the same kind of reality, but there's really three financial realities that many people find themselves in, right? The three financial realities are struggling, like I am struggling financially, that's how they would experience life. I'm stable, like I'm fine, but it's just fine, right? It's not everything I want, but I'm okay. And then there are those that have surplus. And my guess is, as you look at those three, you probably think about, hey, how do you find yourself even right now? Would you call yourself struggling financially? Would you say you're stable financially, or maybe you might be like surplus, like what do you mean surplus? Like who has extra money? I mean, we do now live in a world where there is a human trillionaire, and I have all kinds of thoughts about that. You might as well, but like you might think, oh, that's what surplus looks like, and I could definitely never be in that category. I mean, who has just extra money like lying around? Like you have a picture of like Scrooge McDuck, like diving into, if you grew up in the 90s, right? Just diving into his vault of gold and swimming backstroke in all his extra money. Like nobody does that, right? Or you might think of, people in La Jolla or, crypto bros or whatever. We all have a picture of like, well, that's what surplus looks like. And yet the question for us is that we have to actually level set our expectations and our realities when it comes to the conversation about what it means to have enough financially. And that's what we're going to go after today is rather than feeling bad about it, like none of these things are wrong, but how we relate to our money shows us, if we choose to see it, a lot about how we actually relate to God and work and our sense of identity. That money almost operates like a magnifying glass to help us get really, really clear around what is actually our true belief, not what we claim we want to believe, but what we actually believe about trust and faith and what's good in the world and how we operate in it. And so just to kind of let us like sit in that for just a second, right? Like many of us probably have at times used money in a way that demonstrates a life of surplus without even knowing it, without even like realizing it. We may feel like we are in a space of financial scarcity, or we're struggling, or we may feel like, hey, I'm stable. Like certainly, if you ask the question, I don't like to think about it. If you ask the question, like there's probably people that are worse off than me, so I can't put myself in the lowest category. But I'm not going to say I have surplus. And yet, for many of us, if we're honest, there's probably change lying around our car or our house that we don't even think about. Right? That you have probably purchased something not because it was broken, but because a newer model came out, or because you just got bored or disliked the old one that you'd had, even though it worked perfectly, whether that's a phone or a fridge or a car or a whole kitchen, right? Whatever, right? Like you've probably spent money to relax at different points in your life. Right? And that's great. Like, good for you. Summer is here. Enjoy it, right? But like the reality is for us to think about like, oh, I'm spending money so that I can relax, so that when I get back, I can get back to my normal life of stressing about making more money, right? And we realize the cycles that we often live in. Perhaps, and this is a good thing if you can, like you have so much spare money that you and I actually pay someone else to keep track of all of our spare money and to put it to work for us. Right? Like that's a good thing if you can do that, right? Like, again, none of this is bad, but it is important when we start having this conversation about money to ask the questions, what are my real beliefs and my real realities? And my hope is that today, Jesus and his followers, specifically the Apostle Paul, would actually teach us something about money that we often forget, that we may have never actually been taught. Like it's not about giving, so before you get nervous, right? It's not actually about giving, right? Technology has made giving easier than ever. We ask anyone you want, like they would say giving is a good thing. People believe that giving is good even if they may not do it, right? It's not how to give, but actually how to be generative, how to be generous with your life, how to make whatever money you have matter. How to make this thing that we spend so much of our waking hours, again, the average American will spend over 90,000 hours at work in her or his lifetime, right? Like all of that to make this thing that we feel we need, but how do we actually make that money that we've made matter? And the Apostle Paul, listening to Jesus and living it out in his own life, would teach us that we are actually stressed financially because we have not learned how to live generously. That you and I feel stressed about our finances when we have not learned how to live generously, not learned how to actually become a person that is generative, a generous person. That in fact, Jesus says in Matthew 6:21 that wherever your treasure is, the desires of your heart will also be. So if you want to know what you really care about, according to Jesus, again, don't be mad at me. You may not like this. You may not even believe this, right? But Jesus seemed to believe that if you want to know what really matters to you, you can look at your bank statement. And that will tell you what matters most to you. That Jesus seemed to have this very simple definition of what does it look like to be consumed with money, is that your heart goes after the things that you naturally invest in. Time, energy, resources, right? Wherever your treasure is, your heart is there also. And so to boil it down very simply, Jesus' view of greed was simply an assumption that anything that comes to me is for my consumption. Jesus seemed to operate that if you and I live our life with the assumption that if it comes to me, it's for me, that if I can grab it, if I can take it, if I can have it, then I'm going to do it, then that's actually, he would define it as a greedy way to live. Now, let me ask you a couple questions, right? Like, and you have to answer this out loud. Please don't raise your hand, and definitely no elbowing or whispering, okay? Right? Like, would you ever define yourself as greedy? Like, probably not. Like none of us ever think that we are greedy. Like in all my years of pastoring, right? I've never had anyone like ask to meet them at coffee or come into the office and just be like, Pastor, I need some counsel. I'm just so greedy. Like honestly, that would be so refreshing if someone were to do that. Because I'd be like, great, let's get right to it. Like usually we have to like go through all the hoops and hollers to like get all those things. But for many of us, right, like if we were to look at our life, we would have to wrestle and contend with the question, like our trust is actually in our money far more than we would like to care to admit. Like if you think about your life at different points in time, like you remember when you got like your first job? And I don't know about you, like I made $4.25 an hour at my first job, which to me felt like, I don't know what I'm going to do with all of this money. Like I don't know how I'm going to find enough Slurpees or baseball cards or hockey equipment to like make up for all of this newfound resource in my bank account. I went to the bank with my parents after getting my first job, and I got to pick out checks. Checks are these, for those of you that weren't born in the 1900s, checks are these like rectangle pieces of paper that you used to write words on, and it was worth something. It was cool. You got to literally create resource as long as you had the money in your account. So I got to pick out my first book of checks, and because I was a baller, they had Looney Tunes, and so that was my choice. I went with Looney Tunes checks because I was like very young. And so anyway, I remember I got $4.25 an hour, and I didn't have any bills. Like it was crazy. I lived in my parents' house, and nothing cost money. Everything was there for me, and so this was just like surplus income. If you'd ask me that moment, like, oh yeah, I'm living in the surplus, guys, right? And then I remember like all of a sudden, like I started having expectations, like. A couple years later, I turned 16, I got a car, I got a girlfriend, I wanted my own clothes, I wanted to go out to eat with my friends, I had to put gas in the car, and I mean, at the time, it was like $1.19 a gallon, it was ridiculous. Like, I could only buy 4 gallons of gas for working for an hour, it was travesty. And then I got $6.25, and then $6.75, and then I got like a salary job, after I got out of college. And what's interesting is that even if I got 10% more, 15% more, 200% more, what I had, I never again experienced the feeling of financial surplus like I did when I was 14 with my first job. That no matter how much more money I made, all of a sudden, there was a reason and there was a space that money was going to go. And you've had this experience, my guess is as well, at different points in your life. If I could just make it 10%, if I could just get another job with 10% more, then I would be fine. And then you've gotten it, and you're like, great, I'm never going to overspend again. All my money problems are solved. And then 2 months later, you're like, where'd all the money go? Like, where'd all of this excess money go? And we live in this tension, right, where if we don't make intentional moves with our money, more money will not actually create a better life. The reality is that more money without more discipline or more gratitude only creates one thing, and that's more problems. according to Biggie, and statistics, right? Like that is just true. Like regardless of faith, regardless of income, people that make more money, if they don't see more discipline and more gratitude and generosity in their life, they actually create more problems for themselves. Because Jesus, even though it's hard to hear, was actually onto something when he taught about this in Matthew 6. That money actually only magnifies what is already true about you. That money only magnifies what is already true about me. Now, and if for the next 20 minutes, we can just go with that teaching of Jesus, right? I was just saying that song that like fear and shame have no place in the story of your life because of God's love for you. And I know that this conversation can begin to generate some of those feelings of fear and scarcity and even shame. And you hear a phrase that like money only magnifies what is already true about you, and you know your financial situation, and you're like, so great, I must be a terrible person. Hold on, right? What if, instead of letting that story become true in your life, we ask a different question? If we see it as data and we say, okay, great, so what do we do instead? If I don't like where I'm at, if I don't like how this feels, if no matter how much I make, I want to get back to that feeling that I had with my first job of like, what am I going to do with all this resource? I'm so lucky. Like, wouldn't that be great? What could we do to move in that direction? In fact, in a company I work for, the coaching firm I'm a part of called Novus Global, we had a training on one of our Slack channels this past week on the idea of prosperity. And two of our coaches shared their journey. And one of them has made over $1 million this year. And the other one, she's on track to make over $500,000 this year. And so I'm like, ooh, I'm listening because I've never gotten even close to any of those numbers. That would be interesting. And both of them shared that it was less than a decade ago that they were in very, very different financial situations. That one of them shared that literally 8 years ago, she was living at home with her mom with $50,000 worth of debt off of food stamps. And she made a significant and transformational choice in her life. And this is not a faith-based thing, although I know her to be a person of faith, because I began to implement the steps of saving and generosity. That structuring my life in a way of budgeting and being honest about where I'm at, and building the muscle of generosity when I had negative income allowed me to actually create prosperity to the point where now those habits are still a part of her life. And she's reflecting this to our entire company, and it just drew me thinking about this message. I'm like, this is so perfectly timely, because what we're going to look at today is basically the Apostle Paul's encouragement to a young pastor in a very wealthy area, a port city in the first century that had a lot of wealth, that actually had a huge influx in the last 5 years or so of when he was there, of new people moving to that town. Prosperity was growing, industry was booming. I know it sounds a lot like San Diego, but it actually was Ephesus, and his name was Timothy. And so if you have a copy of the scriptures, you can turn to 1 Timothy chapter 6. In the seat back pocket in front of you is a blue Bible. You can grab this one and open to page 721, all the way towards the back. We're going to read the Apostle Paul's encouragement to Timothy around this idea of what do we do to actually make money matter? How do we actually become generous people? Not just that make more, but actually live fuller lives. And again, it's this idea that we have to wrestle with the question of, if more doesn't equal better, how do we actually live in such a way that we experience the kind of life God has for us as it relates to our finances? And so in 1 Timothy chapter 6, he's closing out his letter, and he's he's encouraging Timothy to remind those in his church in Ephesus, in this wealthy congregation, right, that probably didn't see themselves as wealthy, to actually choose to not just get rich, but to be rich and make their money matter. It says this: tell those who are rich in this world to not be proud and to not trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Apparently, he knew this thing called the stock market was coming, and it was simply going to create anxiety along with resource, right? It is so unreliable. And whether you believe in God or not, or believe that the Bible is true or not, like, you know that part at least is true, right? Like you have experienced anxiety around the moments when you're trusting in money, certain things, I'm supposed to get paid by now, or this is supposed to happen, or I thought that was going to be dependable, and then it went away. Like this is a human experience that Paul is alluding to. And he says, encourage them. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all that we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good, that they should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. And by doing this, right, here's the payoff, right? This is the ROI of this conversation. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, so that they may experience what we all ultimately want, true life. What Paul is encouraging Timothy, there's a couple things we want to break down in this passage that are so incredibly important for us to recognize. Is first off, is it says we need to shift our attention from our money being the thing that gives us meaning and stability and security to actually trusting in God. He says that the reason that you have worry and stress when it comes to the conversation around finances, the reason that maybe even right now you're like, man, I knew I should have slept in today, right? Like whatever it might have been, right? Is because we actually, whether we like to admit it or not, put more trust in our riches and not in the one who richly provides, is what Paul would say. That you and I'm guilty of it as well, that you and I put our trust in our riches, not in the one who richly provides, which is why right after payday, you might feel great about yourself. You might even feel motivated to work. If you've ever had the moment like I have where you're like, oh, I got a bonus, and so now I'm going to work a little harder. Or there's a bonus on the line, and so now I'm going to work a little harder, right? That my motivation is clearly around the riches rather than trusting in who God says I am, right? And so what Paul says is he takes this very normal human experience that can be easily seen as unrelated to anything with God, and because Jesus talks about money so much, he says, no, this is actually now a spiritual issue. That generous people are the people who have ordered their financial lives and ordered their social lives, their relational lives, their spiritual lives around being driven by trust, not money. That we've ordered our lives around generosity as a demonstration of our gratitude and our trust in God, right? When he says their trust should be in God who richly provides and gives us all that we need for our enjoyment. Like there are times, like you've probably had this, I know I have, when you see someone enjoying something that they earn, you see someone getting a new car, right? Someone comes to church with a brand new car, and you're like, oh, like, I wonder if they feel convicted about that at all. Like, you had those moments, like maybe you haven't said them out loud, but we've thought them, let's be honest. Right? Like, and you can have this, I'll just name it, like this non-biblical perception of wealth begin to bubble up within you of if someone is enjoying their resource, that's actually a negative thing. And Paul would say, actually, that's not true at all. That God gives us the things that we have for our enjoyment. God is like a good heavenly Father that wants to see you enjoy the things in your life and also gives us the wisdom and the discipline to order them in such a way that we don't accidentally get in a habit and a pattern where the things that are meant for our enjoyment ultimately create stress and anxiety and deteriorate our trust. And we've all been there as well, right? And no matter what the dollar amount is, right, he never classifies that. He goes, those who are rich should be rich in good deeds. That how do you know that you're rich? Like, if you want to be rich, have you ever thought about it? Have you ever had an aspiration to be rich? Paul says it's not about earning another zero on your paycheck. It's not about having another, certain number in your 401k. It's not about getting that next promotion. If you want to be rich, he goes, here's the very simple principle. Be rich in good deeds. Be ready to share with others. Give to those in need. Well, how do I qualify those who are in need, Paul? It's like, maybe ask them. Maybe ask them, maybe notice if they're in need. And so here's what's challenging for us as we see very clear teaching about this in the scriptures, is we try to kind of maneuver our way through it with a bunch of, I'll be honest, like I have this tendency, like cynical whatabouts, right? That I'll see this, it's super clear, it's not that complicated. I'll just check, see if the Greek meant it a little bit differently. Like, or what was the historicity of that passage? It's like, nope, dang it, nothing there. It's still true, right? It doesn't actually change anything. Dang it, I just don't want to be that kind of person. I just want to find my way out of letting God get all up in my business, literally, because this is the consumption assumption that we live with. And rather than pushing back at God or pushing away the scriptures or pushing down ourselves feeling guilty or shameful, what if we simply said, oh, look, there it is again. There's that thing I don't want to admit, that money is actually a mirror in my life. And Paul is clearly saying in this passage, if you and I want to take it, money is both a mirror and a muscle in our spiritual development. That if I want to grow, if you want to grow, I actually have been given a gift and a tool to help me see very, very clearly where it is that I can grow in my life by looking at my money. That it both is a mirror and it looks back and it tells me the truth, whether I want to hear it or not, and it is a muscle. It is a tool that I can use to build strength. And so for many of us, we've heard all different kinds of stories, all different kinds of perhaps even like scripture adjacent phrases around what does it mean to live with a biblical or Christ-like mindset when it comes to our resources. And we can all find ourselves in different spots, from the prosperity gospel to the poverty gospel to the way that money has been treated as it's always negative. You know, you've heard the phrase, like, love of money is the root of all evil. Like that is definitely true, but that does not make money evil, right? Like what Jesus is saying is actually money is neutral. As much as we don't like to admit that, as much as we don't know how to live that way, money to God and money in reality is emotionally neutral. Your money feels nothing for you. It just exists. But we are the ones, according to Lynn Twist in her incredible book, The Soul of Money, we are the ones that attach so much emotional investment into our finances. And so the question is, if money actually doesn't have emotion, if money in and of itself does not have the ability to be meaningful in and of itself, what do we do with it? How do we make money matter? And what Paul simply says in this passage to Timothy, and what I believe the Spirit of God wants to tell you and tell me today, and anyone who's listening online, is that this is how you actually make money matter, is you learn how to be generous. That you allow your money to be generative, not just for you, but for the world around you. That money is not the meaning, right? Money is not the meaning of your life. Money is not the point. And when we live like it is, we actually end up living a life that is meaningless. It is empty. And what we want to do is see money not as meaning, but as a means. It's a tool. It's a means to an end. It's a functionality of doing something meaningful in your life. That money is a tool that God has given us to actually leverage with the potential to make your life meaningful if you choose to. And so if you were to think about your life this week, if you were to think about how you've leveraged your resource, and you were to ask the question, how can I be generative? And let me be very clear that generative living goes far beyond just giving resources. But I use my money to create something that helps other people. I use my money and my time and my energy and my gifts to actually generate something beautiful or powerful or meaningful in the world. And I think of many people that have done that in our church. I think of the Jensens. Like, they found our church through a random kind of mutual connection, and they were kind of on this journey of discovering, like, what does it mean to actually love and follow Jesus in a new way? And they found our church, and they got plugged in, and they found ways to actually move their life in a direction that stretched them and has grown them. And Christy has jumped in to serve with the cafe, and she gives her time to actually create beauty and meaning and conversation here in our church, while also the rest of the week is an incredible hairstylist and has all these moments of conversation that she creates space for in her studio. And Morgan, her husband, is a part of our church. It's been so much fun to watch how he has gotten engaged, saying, I want to step in and actually serve and build and be present, not just for my own kids, but for the other kids in our church, serving in both Restoration kids and Restoration students. He was here all 3 nights of camp, and he was my son's table leader. And my son would come home and be like, Dad, I wish you were cool like Mr. Morgan. And I'm like, noted. Me too. But like on Father's Day, man, like you're more than just a great dad to your kids. Like, you're a spiritual dad to kids in our church. Those that have great dads, though they can't see it. And also those that may not. And I'm so excited and grateful for the ways that your family is building this church, that you are living generative lives. I think of Mike and Toby Pate. Toby shared this at a Welcome to Church brunch a month or so ago, and I knew this already, but it was so powerful to hear her share it. That as she, with some health concerns a couple of years ago, had kind of been led into an early retirement from nursing, she found our church as a place to leverage the gifts that God had placed in her. And she shared how this, this community has not only been a gift to her, but it was so powerful to watch around the table as people reflect back how, Toby, you've been a gift to them. And you'll see Toby at the front door and has not let any of the issues that she's had keep her back. Mike will be serving on our facilities team, moving things around. And if you don't see Toby at the front door, it means one of two things. It's either her week off or she's serving in Restoration Kids, because she won't quit. And Toby's like our resident church grandma. Just everywhere she goes is caring for people, making them meals. She's the first to sign up on a meal train when someone has their own health concerns or someone has a baby, the way she's partnered with new moms and leveraged the thing that she used to do professionally now to simply generate goodness and beauty in the world and specifically in our church community. Toby and Mike, we honor you. We're grateful for you to see the ways that you have allowed this idea to not just be my work that's separate from my spiritual community, but you have infused it with integrity, and it's been a gift. I think of Elaine and Julie, 2 ladies that you probably well know that met here at Restoration Church. And through serving together, they decided that there's this mutual desire that God was bubbling up in each of them, and they decided that they were better together. And so they decided to team up and start a company to actually create meaningful moments where community is generated throughout our city. And as things have begun to pick up for them, it's amazing how they're taking the values of Jesus and of the church and actually infusing that into real work outside the walls of this building, outside of this community. And as people are drawn to what they are creating, they know it's because of what God has done in them. That what God has generated in their own story, they are now choosing to generate outside for others. Whether they know it or not, whether people know it's from God or not, we are seeing many of you. There's so many stories of people that have decided to generate beautiful things with their life. And this is what it means to be a part of a spiritual community that is generous and generative. As we think back to all that we've gone through as a community these last, 6.5, 7 months coming into this new year, and the way that our staff has adjusted and navigated challenging realities. And all of our staff have gone in to find other jobs that they bring in resource for their families while also continuing to serve in our church. I was sharing with my coach this week about the story and about how none of our staff decided to exit even when pay cuts were a reality as we began 2026. And how Ryan is creating incredible resource for people that could not otherwise experience counseling and community and coaching through True North Catalyst. The music that Michael is creating in the ways that he's connecting to other people and the time and the energy he's putting into that. The way Kat has stepped into new coaching spaces. The way Jeremy is leveraging his gifts as a consultant for restaurants and other businesses and creating massive resource in our community, leveraging this building for people that need a space to gather, to celebrate bar mitzvahs and music recitals and birthday parties and business meetings. Like I mentioned, Elaine and Julie and Leandra as well, who is stepping into new ways as a mom, as well as a business owner. All of our staff have forcibly but joyfully had to leverage a new way of living into this pattern of saying, God, it's not just about what do I make in terms of money, but it's what do I make happen in the world. And when you and I begin to have that mindset of I'm not just looking for what I can get, but what I can create. What am I generating? What am I generous with my life about? God begins to do a beautiful work in our life. And I believe that that is true for you as well. That God has actually called you and created you to be more than just a consumer. That you and I are designed by God to actually begin to organize our life, not just through random acts of giving to charity or throwing some money in a bucket, but to be all about it, all for a life that is generative. That we center our life actually around generosity financially, relationally, socially, energetically, and spiritually. And that when we do that, not only will we begin to feel more financially free, less financially anxious and stressed, but we will also see the blessings of God. And it becomes this exponential impact, this regenerative impact of the more I actually engage in generosity, the more I discover that I have something to be grateful to God for. That this is the better way of Jesus, that this is actually how we make our money matter, is we choose not just to try and get rich, but to actually choose to be rich. And so, if that is a step that you are interested in, I want to give you a couple potential next steps, right? That one is we have a resource for you, and it's free. It's free for you. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's free for you if you would like it. It's called The Generosity Ladder. Let me give you a caveat. This book is not for anyone that does not already find themselves convinced that generosity is a good thing. Right? If you read this with a skeptical heart, hoping that it will convince you that generosity is good, you will be sorely disappointed. But if you find yourself in the position where you want to be generous, but you may not know how. You already believe that giving is good, and you want to be empowered that generosity is a way that you actually grow spiritually, that you see it as less of a set it and forget it kind of disposition, and more of a ladder of spiritual growth, then this book will be incredibly powerful for you. So there's a stack of them out by the Next Steps wall. I would encourage you to grab it, read it if you would like. That would be one next step that you could do on your own. Read it by the pool on your vacation that you paid for with all of your extra surplus income this summer, right? The second thing is something that as a community, we want to just invite you into and what we're calling our strategic summer giving challenge, right? Q3, typically as a church, is our lowest giving quarter. It accounts for about 17.5% of our giving throughout the year. And just as we've grown up a lot as an organization, we're just making sure that you are aware of where we are. And so if you're a guest and you're here joining us today, you can literally tune me out for the next 2 minutes for this part. But if you call Restoration Church home, we believe that as adults, created in the image of God, pursuing the way of Jesus, that talking about money is actually an important part of our spiritual growth. And so I would invite you, if you would like to participate in what we're calling the Strategic Summer Giving Challenge, right? That we want to actually be people that are committed to putting God first in our finances and doing our part to avoid what we call the summer slump, right? And to actually be strategic with our giving, knowing that you could actually grow this summer by making your money matter. And so if you scan that QR code on the screen behind me, all it's going to do is take you to a form. It's not sexy. There's no gotcha. There's no, but it's going to take you to a form, and it's going to ask you if you would like to participate in our summer strategic giving, our strategic summer giving challenge. And it's going to ask you over, it's literally 89 days between today and September 15th, which is when we kind of step into our final season of the year. And perhaps this would be a great opportunity for you to go, hey, I'm curious what I am giving, and I want to maybe reassess that. Maybe you've had a set it and forget it mindset when it comes to your generosity, specifically as it relates to the church. And that's no problem. But maybe there's an invitation that God might have for you to grow. Maybe you'll read the Generosity Ladder book, and then you'll be like, oh, I actually want to grow in my generosity. Maybe as you look to what you've given so far this year, which you'll get that report if you've given shortly after the end of this month, and you might find yourself going, oh, I thought I was more involved. I thought I was more engaged. And this is an opportunity to step up in a new way, perhaps. Or maybe you've never given to what God is doing here at Restoration Church. You've been around for a little while. You've called this place your home. You've benefited from it. And you've just never chosen to trust God to grow you through your generosity. I would encourage you, this is a great place and a great time to actually start. That as a community, like we totally exist on the generosity of everyday, ordinary folks saying, my commitment is to God through the work of this church. And it's not about a certain dollar amount, but we invite people to choose a percentage of your income that might fluctuate as your income may go up and down, but to be consistent in growing the percentage of your income that you trust and give back to God so that you grow in the process, so that more opportunities can happen for more people in and through what God is doing at Restoration Church. Things like kids camp this week, things like businesses being started and people finding faith and finding meaning, things like baptisms that we're going to celebrate at the end of summer, that you get to be a stakeholder in all of that as we give towards the work of God here at Restoration Church. And so here's the thing. You may not be able to fill that out right now. That's totally okay. But I would encourage you to do one of three things in the next few moments that we're going to give you together to reflect on how your generosity shows up in your life. Is to actually scan that QR code so you have it, and to do one of three things. Maybe you are ready to fill it out. You're like, you know what? No time like the present, I'm going to jump in. Great, no problem. We love that. Maybe for you, it's to actually book a time on your calendar in that same smartphone that you're holding and scanning that QR code with, to actually put a time on your calendar when you're going to discuss this with your spouse or with your family, to say, we're going to actually have the conversation around how as a family or how as a couple or whatever it might look like for you to actually make a decision around our finances and around our generosity. Or maybe for you, you would just take this moment to have an honest conversation with God. And you would say the thing that you've been unwilling to say up until now. Of God, I don't like talking about money because even though I don't want to, I know it is a mirror. And it's showing me something that I don't like that's true. And I'm afraid. And yet, you can actually put into practice what we just sang about earlier, is that, God, I'm going to actually prophesy your promise over my life. I'm actually going to choose to believe that your way is better. And that though I feel fear and maybe even feel shame about it, that actually has no place in my relationship with you, and that I can actually trust in you, God, and that this is a place that you may actually be invited to step into that at a deeper level. So we all have a next step we get to take in the next few minutes. We're going to put some quiet music on and give you actually about a minute or two to do some work with God, because we never believe that just what I have to say is the only thing that God wants to say to you here on a Sunday morning. And so I would invite you to either set it up. You can do it right now and set up recurring giving. You can set it on your calendar of when you're going to have the conversation about it. Or you could have an honest conversation with God about how your generosity is a way for you to grow spiritually. And if you need it, grab one of these copies on the way out. They are there for you. But here's the thing. If giving has been a space that's been challenging in the past for you, I want to say this very, very clearly. Yes, we would love your participation here. Absolutely. More of us getting involved, it allows us collectively to do more than we could alone, just like Pastor Ryan shared earlier as it relates to kids camp. That's a powerful principle about community. And also, we believe in generosity as a development tool for your spiritual maturity so much that if you have to give somewhere else instead of here just to get into the practice, we would encourage you to do that. Like, I don't know any other church that would maybe say that, right? Like we would absolutely rather you do something to practice the spiritual muscle of generosity that does not directly benefit our organization than to do nothing at all, because we care about you that much. So I want to pray for us, and then I want to give us some time to do some work around this idea with God together. All right, so I'm going to pray. I'm going to say amen. I'm going to leave the stage. There's going to be a minute and a half or so of quiet time for you to reflect. That's not an accident. Michael did not forget to come up. He did not miss his cue, okay? That is intentional, because we often don't create space for ourselves to have this moment, and it's too important to skip. All right? So let me pray for us. God, thank you. Thank you that you spoke about money because you care about our hearts. Thank you that you were willing to even say the uncomfortable thing because you want to make sure there's nothing in the way between us and you. And so God, whatever might be occurring in our souls or in our hearts and our minds, whatever we might think or feel or believe about money coming into this moment, I pray we would even give ourselves the gift of being open to what you might want to do, Holy Spirit. We might have all of our preconceived ideas, and yet you might have something waiting for us that would surprise us, maybe even challenge us. What I believe is it will definitely invite us into what Paul promises, true life. So God, I pray that we would not be the kinds of people who avoid the thing that is going to give us what we most want because it doesn't come in the package that we presumed it would come in. But that we would actually trust you in the process. So I'd invite you to take a moment to have a conversation with God, to consider how your generosity may move your spirituality. And then in a moment, our team's going to come up, lead us in some songs. You can worship, you can sing, you can give. Our prayer team will be back in the back if you'd like someone to pray with and for you. But take this time to do some business with God.